Okay, welcome everybody to the Australian Chamber of Commerce Vietnam Education Symposium 2021. My name is Aaron Fennell. I'm the co-chair of the AusCham Education and Training Committee, along with one of AusCham's life members, Brian O'Reilly. I'm also the MC of this event. This symposium was meant to be an in-person event earlier this year in both Ho Chi Minh City and also in Hanoi. And the AusCham Education and Training Committee has worked hard for several months to bring this event online for 2021. As of 8 a.m. this morning, we have 271 registrations, and we're still just admitting some people in as we speak. The Australian Qualifications Framework provides a clear structure for education from secondary schooling to vocational and higher education. And the presenters here represent a vibrant cross-section of these sectors. The presenters are all working as leaders in their institutions, and they have vast experience. And as you can see from the symposium booklet, they are all at the top of their game. It's a real honor to bring them here together. The symposium title is Realising Opportunities and Partnerships in the Digital World, and we have three themes which we use to design the content. The three themes are, firstly, the positioning of Australian education in Vietnam, secondly, the digitisation of education, and thirdly, partnerships between institutions in Australia and Vietnam. While this is an AusCham event, these three themes are relevant to a much wider audience. The full lineup and details are available on the AusCham website via your registration link as well. And I'd just like to note that there are a few minor adjustments to timings which have been made earlier this week, so it's worthwhile to download this booklet again today for your reference. As an online event, we have kept it to 2 hours each day, and the panel sessions will welcome questions from the audience in the Zoom chat each day. At the end of tomorrow, we also have an opportunity for deeper audience engagement and feedback. But now I would like to introduce Simon Pugh, Group CEO of QLM Label Makers and President of AusCham, for his opening remarks. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Aaron. Good morning to everybody. And on behalf of the Australian Chamber of Commerce, welcome everyone, and thank you for attending the AusCham Education Symposium 2021. After the successful education events hosted by AusCham and Austrade in 2018-19 and paused for reason in 2020, the attendance of over 270 participants at this year's event demonstrates how important the education links between Australia and Vietnam are. We would like to welcome and thank Dr. Pham Quang Hung, Director General, International Cooperation Department and Ministry of Education and Training in Vietnam, for joining us this morning, and we look forward to your keynote speech. Further, we welcome Rebecca Ball, the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner of Vietnam and Cambodia with Austrade, and Jennifer Bain, the Education and Research Counsellor at the Australian Embassy. And thank you for your participation and support of the symposium. In these very difficult times, AusCham wishes to acknowledge the efforts being made by the Vietnamese government to lead the country and its people, including the large group of foreign residents living here, to a safe living with COVID world. This has included the equitable access to vaccines and food support when needed. On the 15th of March 2018, Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc and then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull signed a joint statement on the
Sorry, Simon. You just need to unmute.
Yep, I think sorry about that, everybody. Don't we love online meetings? So we established the Economic Engagement Strategy, or EES, which is the recognition of the importance of Australia and Vietnam's mature and diverse bilateral relationship, encompassing wide-ranging cooperation on political issues, trade, investment, defence and security, and importantly, education. The ever-strengthening relationship between Vietnam and Australia comes at a time of large shifts in geopolitical alliances and trading partners. Quality service providers from both of our countries stand to benefit from these closer ties. The Australian Chamber of Commerce, founded in 1995, has for many years served as the peak representative body for Australian business interests in Vietnam. AusCham's role is to help light the path for Australian investors into Vietnam by landscaping the local business environment, connect potential investors with existing members, advocate for policy from the Australian and Vietnamese governments supportive of easier trade and investment, and to connect the business community in country addressing their needs as and when they arise. These initiatives in recent times have included connecting our members to vaccine programs, hosting online seminars on business investment, business matching, gender in the workplace, and importantly, in these times, mental health and wellness in lockdown. The Chamber, through its partners both in Vietnam and Australia, have raised over $200,000 for charity in the past month alone, and these contributions will help a number of Chamber-aligned charities, from access to food support for the local community to childhood education and keeping kids safe programs. COVID has created a need like never before. AusCham is also a founding member of the VBF, or Vietnam Business Forum, the peak representative body of foreign business chambers. This organisation has a number of working groups advocating directly to their respective Vietnamese government departments across a wide range of FDI interests. And AusCham members head the agribusiness, mining, and importantly, the education working groups. Through its working group representatives, AusCham has access to the decision makers of policy settings. In June this year, and following 18 months of efforts initiated by previous board members, AusCham signed the establishment of the Vietnam-Australia Business Council, or VABC, with the Vietnam Chamber of Commerce, or VCCI, and yes, we love our acronyms. The establishment of the VABC is one of only 3 direct to VCCI representative bodies, and it speaks to the importance of the relationship between Australia and Vietnam. The purpose of the VABC is to highlight to both the Australian and Vietnamese government areas where advancement in policy can be made to improve the conditions for trade and investment, and education is a very key focus of this. And finally, AusCham works closely with the official branches of the Australian government, represented by the Embassy and Consulate as DFAT, along with Austrade, to promote Brand Australia in Vietnam, because we passionately believe that this brand represents the very best there is when we are working to our strengths, including the provision of education and learning. Before the COVID pandemic closed borders, Australia had become the 3rd most popular destination in the world for foreign students enrolled in higher education. In 2019 alone, Australia attracted over 750,000 international students who enrolled in universities, tech colleges, vocational education training colleges, English language courses, and regular schools. And 80% of these inbound students came from Asia, to help with a sector in our economy worth over $40 billion in that year, making it one of the largest sectors of the economy. In recognition of this sector's importance and brand excellence, AusCham has established a revamped Education and Training Committee to help support the growing network of people involved with education in the AusCham community. We would like to thank Aaron Fennell and Brian O'Reilly as co-chairs of this committee, along with their members, for bringing together this symposium, as well as the other areas that they are working on in education. Education is about building capacity and sustainability. In the rapidly developing Vietnamese economy, there is a need for skilled employees across all business sectors, and the lack of this training will only create capacity constraints. As Aaron mentioned, I am the CEO of a company making self-adhesive labels, or stickers. Our industry has seen firsthand how a good VET program ensures proper tradespeople to help to grow our industry. Now, if education is about learning, then we can certainly call 2020 and 2021 the syllabus of a lifetime. We have learned a whole new language. We've learned new ways to stay connected, and to communicate, and we've learned the need to be able to adapt in a time of immense uncertainty. And I think we've also learned that we only have to dress from the waist up for meetings. In this new world we find ourselves trying to navigate, it has been driven by the largest change in human connection that any of us are likely to see in our lifetime. And it goes to the heart of this year's AusCham Education Symposium, realizing opportunities and partnerships in a digital world. We look forward to learning about and sharing the opportunities that present themselves in the current education landscape as we work to a COVID new normal. Because like all things we have to endure, this too will end. And when we come out the other side, it is vital that we as a sector are ready to embrace the new world, ready to communicate in a new way, and ready to grab hold of the opportunities that arise. Malcolm X said of education, it is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. So today, let's plan for the future for our sector in Vietnam. We hope you enjoy the next 2 days. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you very much. That was Simon Pugh, the president of AusCham. As the MC, I would now like to introduce the first of our 2 keynote speakers for the day. Dr. Pham Kung Hung is the Director General, International Cooperation Department, Ministry of Education and Training. So a little about Dr. Pham. Dr. Pham Kung Hung was born in Hanoi, Vietnam. He obtained his Bachelor of Science degree from the National University of Civil Engineering, Hanoi, and completed his Master of Science degree and then PhD degree at the University of Saskatchewan, Canada in 2005. In early 2015, he was promoted as Director General of Vietnam International Cooperation Department, Ministry of Education and Training. Dr. Pham.
You mute, please. Dr. Pham, you mute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aaron Funnell. Thank you. Mr. Simon Pugh, AusCham President. Mr. Jan Behan, Education and Research Consular, Australian Embassy. Mr. Rebecca Bo, Senior Trade Commissioner, Offshore, Vietnam. Distinguished participants. First of all, I'd like, on behalf of the Ministry of Education and Training of Vietnam, like to express my sincere thanks to AusCham for inviting me to speak today at this very important education symposium. During the spread of COVID-19 in Vietnam and many places in the world, the organization of this symposium is a great effort of AusCham in supporting education cooperation between Vietnam and Australia. Education and training has been one of the key pillars of the bilateral relationship between Vietnam and Australia for last 48 years. The strategic partnership has been strengthening and growing Vietnam-Australian significant people-to-people linkages. I'm very happy to see that our 2 countries continue to be strategic partners in education and training, which is essential to our human resource development and economic goals. The Out for Skill project, an ODA of Australia to Vietnam, has been implemented since 2016, achieved remarkable results in developing the human resource for our country. The MOU on education and training cooperation between 2 countries were renewed in 2018, where our 2 governments agreed to more diversified education partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, as Vietnam is integrating in economy extensively into the global economic, education and training stand the key in the development of high-quality human resource for national development. There were many joint training programs, scientific research projects, exchange program of lecturers and students between Vietnam and foreign universities. Currently, there are more than 400 joint training program between Vietnam University and foreign partners, in which there are 37 joint training programs between 21 Vietnamese universities and 17 Australian universities. The data in 2020 and 20 show that there are around 26,000 Vietnamese students are studying in Australia. In the total, about 190,000 Vietnamese students are studying abroad. RMIT Vietnam is the first foreign university in Vietnam, and showing it's one of the best foreign university invested in Vietnam right now. Within Vietnam and Australian Human Resource Development Program, now called Offshore Skill period 2016-2021, every year we coordinate with Australian Embassy to select about 50 to 80 scholarship students to study in Australia for master degree. Also implement capacity building for lecturer and official in higher and technical education. Recently, two governments agreed to continue the Offshore Skill for the next 5 years, 2021-2025. In addition, within the APEC, CMO, ASEAN framework, our officials have been also working closely with representatives from Australian Department of Education to foster our bilateral and multilateral education relationship. We well know that the education internationalization is very important in improving the quality of education and result in quality of human resource and national productivity. Some new policy to foster integration in education, such as the law on higher education issued in 2018, the decree number 86 in 2018 on foreign cooperation and investment in education, the circular number 38 in 2020 on online and blended joint training program, which is receive support from Australian partner. Ministry of Education and Training is also submitting a new decree on research in university to the government, and that will soon be published. I'd like to inform you that we are revising the decree 86 and will submit to the government very soon. The revision focused on the joint training program, joint education, and joint for organizing foreign language certification exam. Therefore, we'd like to would expect more joint quality training program as well as research program between the two countries. Ministry of Education Training is implementing the project 89, which is improving the quality of lecturer and manager in university, under which we would like to send our lecturer to study PhD in reputed foreign university, as well as the joint PhD program between Vietnamese university with a reputed foreign university. Besides, capacity building is for university manager is also important goal of this project. As you know that foreign language, especially English, is one of the important key for internationalization. Currently, we are running the National Foreign Language Project, aiming at improving the quality English teaching and learning for the Vietnamese young generation. We'd like Australian partners to support and cooperate with us in these two projects. Besides, we are looking forward to further collaboration with, between Vietnam and Australian institutions to having more international students from other countries, including Australia to Vietnam, for both short-term training, credits, as well as the full-time study. We are seeking for investment and support to Vietnam in tertiary institutions in quality assurance, university management, research, as well as the business university linkages. Last but not least, on behalf of the Ministry of Education and Training, Vietnam, I'd like to send our best wishes to AusCham especially in education member for your endeavor and successful engagement in Vietnam. Thank you everybody for joining Symposium and have fruitful discussion today and tomorrow. We are looking forward to working closely with you to further develop and consolidate a close friendship between Vietnam and Australia in education and training. We wish you good health. Stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's Dr. Pham Quang Hung, the Director General from the International Cooperation Department, Ministry of Education and Training. Thank you very much. In response, we have a keynote from Ms. Jen Bahan, the Education and Research Counsellor from the Australian Embassy in Vietnam. Jen has been the Counsellor for Education and Research to the Australian Embassy in Vietnam with responsibility to Vietnam and Thailand. Prior to this role, Jen was the Director for International Education at TAFE Directors Australia and brings with her a detailed knowledge of Australia's tertiary education system and particularly vocational education and training. Earlier this morning, we had some transmission concerns, so we've actually got a pre-recording from Jen. She couldn't guarantee reliable transmission right now. So we're going to cue a tape and play from Jen. Okay, Jen's currently muted the pre-recording. Can we get some sound, please?
Entitled Researching Opportunities and Partnerships in the Digital World. Before I start, I'd just like to make a couple of acknowledgements. I'd first of all like to acknowledge my colleagues at AusCham, Mr. Simon Pugh, Mr. Simon Fraser, but I'd also like to particularly acknowledge the members of AusCham Education Committee, newly recrafted Education Committee, Mr. Aaron Fennell, Nan, and the rest of the committee who've put together a fantastic program for you today. And the name of this symposium that's centred around digital transformation is really apt, given that AusCham pivoted from a planned face-to-face event into this virtual event that we're sitting in here today. So I'd just like to congratulate you all on that. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague from Moet, Dr. Hung from ICD. Thank you so much, as ever, for supporting our education relationship and for sharing your insights here today. They're, as always, really valuable, and particularly as they pertain to what's next for internationalisation in Vietnam. For those who don't know me, my name's Jen Bain. I'm the Counsellor for Education and Research at the Australian Embassy in Hanoi. My colleagues and I are going to be present over the next few days, so please feel free to reach out to any of us and have a conversation, and particularly post the forum as well. What I'm going to try to do over the next couple of slides in a really short period of time is take a bit of a broad brush look at the Australia-Vietnam education relationship. It's a really long, deep, broad relationship, and I can't hope to capture it all, but I thought I'd talk about what now, what's important now, and then what next for the relationship, because that's where we all should be looking to the future. So I'll start by looking at a little bit of the environmental factors in Vietnam. So what now is really impacting the shape of education, research and training in Vietnam? Unfortunately, I can't talk about that without, of course, acknowledging the dreadful COVID wave that's crossing Vietnam at the moment. And I'd really like to acknowledge everyone who's dialing in from across Vietnam, and indeed in parts of Australia, who are in lockdowns and who are suffering through this COVID wave. Unfortunately, we've now seen over 550,000 infections here, and I think over 14,000 mortalities. And while this is impacting us now, it's impacting the start of the new school and university year here in Vietnam. What I hope it will also do is enable us to move forward creatively and together as we move through and beyond COVID over the years to come. But this is something that we have to acknowledge is impacting us. It's impacting the way we're running this forum here today. I'd also like to acknowledge that Vietnam is a country undergoing really rapid change, particularly rapid change in terms of Vietnam's labour market structure. This graph, which I really like to use, is from a World Bank Global Productivity Report, And it shows the very significant impacts or changes in Vietnam's labour market over the past few years. And you can see that Vietnam has moved from being quite an agrarian-based economy to one that's got a multitude of industry sectors impacting its economic growth. And that's happened really quite quickly in comparison to some other countries. Vietnam is now not just reliant on agriculture, but also reliant on things like manufacturing, finance, transport, logistics, and trade. The reason that I highlight this in an education discussion is that this is going to have real impacts on what Vietnam's education system must deliver to industry. We must be starting to produce graduates who can participate in this multifaceted, rapidly changing labour market, and that surely should drive almost everything that we do. I also would like to acknowledge that Vietnam's a population who's willing to invest in education. This graph from a study in The Economist, which was brought to my attention by my colleague Heike Manning, who I'm sure is listening here today, shows that people in Vietnam are really willing to invest in education in real terms. So if parents and students and consumers in Vietnam see education as valuable and as high quality, then that's something that they're prepared to invest in. And that, of course, must drive some of our foreign collaboration activities. There's a multitude of statistics that I could use today. I'd just like to highlight a few more. I'd be here all day if I tried to highlight all the ones that I like. But a couple of other things that I think you need to keep in mind as we move forward. I've tried to cover a different set of sectors on this slide. So firstly, 30% of graduates from Vietnam's lower secondary education system will not get a place in public upper secondary schools nationwide. So that means there's about 26,000 students in Vietnam who are either going to enter a private schooling system here or who will need to move into the labour market. So there's real scope for growth within that schooling system. There's scope in the skilling sector as well. Vietnam aims to increase the number of people in the labour force with formal training from 57 million in 2020 to 62 million by 2030. And the current capacity of Vietnam's vocational education and training system, while growing, is not strong enough to meet that need. Digitisation is a real key priority for the Vietnamese government, as it is for many governments across the world. Last year, the Prime Minister released a digitisation strategy that states that by 2030, all education institutes in Vietnam will need to offer remote learning and teaching activities where 20% of the curriculum will be taught online. Another interesting statistic playing to that research and university piece is that 10% of Vietnamese university academics will receive PhD training under Vietnam's new scholarship scheme called Project 89, which shows just how committed Vietnam is to creating a research workforce here who can sort of generate innovative and creative research outputs. In the what now, I'd also like to just take a really quick look at what's actually happening now in terms of education collaboration. And I've categorised this part of the presentation as something called connections and partnerships, because that is what I see and our office sees as happening now. A lot of this plays out through the transnational education landscape and competitors, and of course plays out in student mobility and movement between our two countries. I've decided to focus today largely on transnational education. You can see that Australia is a key player in transnational education delivery here in Vietnam, alongside the United Kingdom, the USA and France. And of course, this graph does, my colleagues at RMIT, a bit of a disservice because it doesn't include the significant number of programs on offer at RMIT. And if it did, then Australia would be even more competitively positioned than it is in this current graph. Vietnam's transnational education and training regulatory environment is complex, and this looks complex. This is a list of all of the regulations that apply to transnational education delivery in Vietnam. But when it's distilled out, it's not nearly as complex as diagrams like this might make it to be. So we've got a really good position in the market in terms of transnational education partnerships, and we've also got an environment that allows us to understand what it is Vietnam's looking for and to be able to apply those regulations to the work that we might do. And again, this is an area that our office can really support you in, and we encourage you to reach out and talk to us about these regulations. And they cover all sectors. So on the screen are regulations that cover higher education, vocational education and training, and the schooling system. So please, and of course, online delivery, which we have a new regulation for released last year. So please do reach out to us if you want to understand more. And I will say this offshore delivery has really been resilient in the face of COVID. So enrolments in offshore programs have increased by around 30% here in Vietnam. And we know that for some Australian programs, this has been closer to 50% and even 60%. So we know that transnational education has been a very resilient strategy. And that's one of the reasons that I'm highlighting it in this section here today. I'm also highlighting it because the Vietnamese government welcomes foreign partnerships across all sectors. I will note, though, that the Vietnamese government is keen to see some diversity in this area, particularly in joint PhD delivery, the delivery of vocational education and training programs in partnerships, and curriculum delivery. The Vietnamese government is actually really open to all sorts of different models in terms of this transnational education partnerships here in Vietnam. And the models are really a max up for the two institutes, as long as they represent a sort of fair and equitable partnership for those two institutions. So people listening here today can really get quite creative with what it is they want to do here in Vietnam. And our partnerships are not just in program delivery. We've got a variety of mechanisms that demonstrate that the period of this relationship that we're in right now is all about collaboration and partnership. We have a new enhanced economic engagement strategy between our two countries. We're working really closely with Vietnam's Directorate of Vocational Education and Training to help develop and support their 10-year VET strategy. I can't quite count the number of workshops that I've engaged in with DVET over the past few months, but I know I've got at least 3 coming up over the month of September, and we bring Australian experts to bear within those workshops. We're also supporting the Directorate of Vocational Education and Training with a project around digital transformation in TVET, and we work very closely with them to help support any other development needs that they have. We're also working with MOAT, as Dr. Hung outlined, on an Australia-Vietnam University Leaders project that is looking again at the connection and partnership between Australian universities and Vietnamese universities. And of course, it wouldn't be right of me not to acknowledge the really significant work that my colleagues at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade do in the aid space, particularly in programs like Oz for Skills and Oz for Innovation, which bring our sectors together. So that, I hope, really briefly shows you that what we're doing now is we're connecting and we're partnering together, but we also need to have an eye to what's next. And to me, what's next is to maintain the connection, maintain the partnership, but bring to it a level of depth and complexity with consideration to a couple of key factors. So I've got 2 slides on this. The first is, where are the opportunities in the short term? Where are the opportunities sort of now and in the next few years? Some of those I've talked about already, and some of them will be explored in panels later on this morning and again tomorrow. One of the really interesting areas for me is the development and delivery of Australian school curriculum in international schools or in partnership with private schools here. There's around 123 international schools in Vietnam, and only 7 of them are delivering the Australian school curriculum. And I think that's something we can do a little bit about. I think we can continue in delivering VET policy support, development and capacity building, but also look to what an institutional partnership might look like in vocational education and training. And we have a couple of people who are leading the way here in Vietnam. I know some of them are listening today and some of them are speaking here today. We'd like to see the continuation of the joint program delivery in higher education, but as I'll talk on the next slide, also look to what the evolution of it might be. And we also think there's significant scope to increase research partnerships, particularly driven through those Project 89 scholarship opportunities, but also off the base of the fact that Vietnam has grown their international research output by over 3,000% since 2009. And that's a story that I want us as Australia to be a part of. In terms of what the future will bring, so this is starting to look a little bit beyond that short term and look at a 5 to 10 to 20 year strategy, is really the evolution of those joint programs, particularly in higher ed. So looking at what online can bring to that, whether you combine online with face-to-face delivery, looking at regional hubs using RMIT, campus and other programs like Swinburne and UTS and University of Western Sydney, just as examples, as regional hubs and bringing students from other countries as well as from Vietnam. looking at tripartite research relationships, particularly with industry, who really need that to continue to grow and invest here in Vietnam, but also in partnership with the Vietnamese government. Looking to the industry areas of need, so not just those traditional areas of finance and communications and banking, but also look to logistics, health, agri-tech, ICT, industry, big data, cybersecurity. And to end my presentation, and this is almost like a challenge to AusCham, and somewhere where I really can see AusCham playing such a critical role in partnership with the embassy is in skills training directly to industry. Because even though the institutional partnerships are important, it's also important that the industry has access to those just-in-time skills that they need, and connecting through the chamber to businesses is something I see as a real advantage for us. I'm going to leave it there for now, because I think I've almost run out of time, but I really appreciate you listening to me here today. I encourage you to take a deep dive into all of the panels this morning and tomorrow, and please feel free to reach out if you'd like to learn more to our office. AusCham will have those details available afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was Jen Bayan, Education and Research Counsellor with the Australian Embassy in Vietnam. Now, our next session on the schedule is a panel discussion. If we were at an in-person conference, this would have all panelists up on stage, providing a short speech and then fielding questions from the audience. We're still going to be able to field questions through the chat function, and we're going to allow the presenters to still speak first. I'm now going to introduce the presenters and the panel discussion. The title is The Positioning of Australian Education in Vietnam. We have several panelists who include Mr. Tony Watson, General Manager of Box Hill Institute. He's calling in from Victoria, Australia. Tony Watson, General Manager for Business Development and Partnerships at Box Hill Institute, has over 20 years experience leading vocational education and training programs in the UK and in Australia. Secondly, we have a panelist, Mr. Matthew Monkhouse, Director, Southeast Asia and Eurasia, Global Engagement and Business Development from Macquarie University. Matt has established the Macquarie University Indonesia office, is Jakarta-based and responsible for leading multiple teams based both onshore in Australia and offshore. We have Miss Lynn Nguyen. Lynn is the manager, Mekong, with the Uni of New South Wales, Sydney. She is based in Ho Chi Minh City and is in charge of Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam as the Mekong manager. Previously, she was with Flinders University and also the Australia Club, and has over 8 years experience in Vietnam working with Australian education. And we have Miss Pham Thi Kuk Ha, the Vice Chairwoman, Hanoi Adelaide School. Miss Pham Thi Kuk Ha has been the founder and director of Just Kids Joint Stock Company since 2007, founder and director of SACE College Vietnam since 2016, and founder and vice chairman of Hanoi Adelaide School since 2018. Hanoi Adelaide School is one of only a small number of schools providing Australian curriculum in Vietnam. The moderator for the session will be Mr. Phil Dowler, Head of Campus at RMIT University. Mr. Dowler is the former president of the Australian Chamber of Commerce Vietnam and is the head of the Hanoi campus of RMIT University. He is also director of RMIT Transnational Security Centre, which has been providing transnational crime education for over 15 years to regional police, customs and immigration officers. He represents RMIT Vietnam with the Vietnamese ministries and city authorities across Hanoi. Previously, he was CEO of Australia Helicopter Rescue Service, CQ Rescue, for 12 years, as well as a member of an aviation rescue team participating in more than 400 retrieval and rescue operations. For this work, he was recognised in the 2015 Australia Day Honours list with a medal in the Order of Australia. Mr. Phil, can I pass to you now?
Great, thanks Aaron. Sensational that we're all here today, and thanks for the introduction. Thanks Jen Bayan for joining us on this education panel, and Dr. Hung, lovely to see you again. It's been a long time. With COVID, we haven't had a chance to meet each other this year. I'd like to really thank AusCham for putting on this symposium today. It's been many months into planning. We've had Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D, Plan E with COVID. So we've lost a lot of hair. Back in January, I had a full head of hair, was brown and blonde. And with COVID, it's kind of fallen out a little bit. But it's great we're all here today to share the Australian education experience. Australia offers a variety of pathways in education, and today's panel will be focusing on the secondary, tertiary, and vocational sectors. Each sector is unique in its own way, offering outstanding educational outcomes for our students while they navigate their lifelong educational journeys. But particularly now with COVID, we all need to be future focused. What is going to change? What will the education look like post 2022? And how can Australian education be both innovative and adaptive? So on today's panel, each panelist will speak for around about 5 minutes, and then hopefully at the end we'll have around 20 minutes of Q&A. So there's plenty of opportunity for the audience here today to join us. And as Aaron rightly pointed out, we have an outstanding panel today looking at those three sectors. So now to kick off the event, I would like to welcome Mr. Matt Monkhouse to share his experience on the tertiary education sector, in particular from Macquarie University. Thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Thank you, Philip. Delighted to be here, and I hope I'm coming through nice and clear. And I'd like to also just express a big thank you to AusCham Vietnam for hosting this wonderful event and for all the wonderful work you do in general. Macquarie University, very proud to support AusCham Vietnam. So love the topic, all the things I could talk about all day. Some of my favourite things, higher education, in this instance, the benefits of Australian higher education within the context of Vietnam. Vietnam being one of my absolute favourite countries, place where I've spent considerable amount of time over, say, the last 15 years for both work and leisure as well. Look, I'd say Vietnam, just to open, I think I'd say Vietnam certainly remains one of Australia's most important bilateral relationships, and for Macquarie University, Vietnam is also identified as a country for strategic engagement where we are quite active, and I'd suggest this is the case for many Australian universities also, and increasing in scope. We do have many Vietnamese students studying at Macquarie University, and we certainly welcome them, and we also have a fast growing alumni community on the back of that, though what we also particularly value are the mutually beneficial relationships, the partnerships that we have across Vietnam with government institutions, thinking corporate, and industry with whom we work closely on a range of initiatives. So looking at the topic, today's panel discussion, positioning of Australian education in Vietnam, benefits of Australian higher education. I think we're all familiar with things like rankings, quality, reputation, policy and protections, experience, environment, research, graduate outcomes, all these things that make Australia the best destination in the world for international education. So I thought rather than, obviously just recover those sorts of areas, I'd focus in a little more on the topic of transnational education, something we've already heard quite a bit about in the opening sessions, a big focus for both Australia and Vietnam, and something that will continue to develop, and I would say be a part of Australia's engagement with Vietnam, and I think a benefit obviously for all stakeholders there. And I think in the broader context, we can really be sure that, with global demand for higher education outweighing that supply, transnational education will continue to grow, and it's going to assume prominence in university strategies, as it does here with Macquarie University. We often, I would say, perhaps associate the term transnational education or T&E, particularly when referring to offshore or branch campuses, with yourself, Philip, and our friends from RMIT setting the gold standard in that space. But there's also many other areas. You think of franchising, program licensing, articulations, credit transfers, joint degree, dual degree, distance delivery. So it's quite a broad area. If you're sort of thinking of the broader transnational education partnerships, and T&E, it's a key focus for Macquarie University, and we've strategically partnered with universities in key program areas across Vietnam. These programs are very important to us in regular times, but very interesting, I think to have these established, we were, I'm not going to say lucky, because I'd like to think it's more good planning, but obviously as COVID hit, it actually became vital, to have these programs in place in country with these travel restrictions. Many students who may have immediately gone overseas commencing at home institutions in established T&E programs before they look to transfer to Australia once borders or travel restrictions are listed. Partners reporting significant increases in commencing students in their home campuses. So many of our partner institutions have also become what you could term localised study centres during the COVID period, which has become, again, such a good part of, the student support, to have a place for our students to be as well, even in these T&E programs, has been a blessing in disguise. So looking at these models, thinking about benefits of Australian higher education, it's not just for students, of course, immediately commencing their degree programs in Australia. We've got to think collectively of all the wonderful work the Australian higher education sector undertakes offshore in developing these partnerships and supporting the Australian education, higher education providers and the sharing of knowledge. That again makes Australia one of the best in this space. So just being conscious of time, I won't go into too much detail, but before we go and move into more of the discussion, thinking of the benefits, I guess to all stakeholders. So starting there with some of the benefits to our Vietnamese institutional partners. It's about building that partnership, enhancing the relationship, and for our partners, internationalisation, of course, such a key area. So from our sort of perspective from Macquarie, when we look at identifying partners, it's all about establishing those deep, wide partnerships. So we only look to partner with the university where we can also collaborate across a range of key areas. So we're thinking research, building those academic connections, linking our academics, our professors becomes very, very important. Mobility, looking to send as many students as we can and having a destination or an institutional partner where we can send our Australian and other international students, whether that's on short-term or full exchange programs, guest lectures, joint conferences, projects, shared training. So important that it's not one-sided. We're not just having students move through, it's that real partnership. So thinking partners will also, utilise these programs to then attract students that may have immediately gone overseas. So also a sense of high value to them in being able to build and have students come into these joint programs as well. So that's also very important. Then sharing of knowledge, sharing of information, access to digital learning platforms, software, learning materials, support training, online unit delivery. That's obviously ramped up through COVID as well. Things that may not have been appropriate or considered appropriate before COVID, pre-COVID, are now quite acceptable with being able to teach some of these units directly online into our partner universities, enhancing some of those, particularly those dual programs or joint programs. Very, very easy now with that online delivery, and many more, but I won't go into those. Then, of course, just thinking of students, parents, making international education more accessible. Cost saving, of course, comes into that. More time at home to mature, particularly for those younger undergraduate students. It's still gaining that overseas experience at the end as they potentially may transfer across to an Australian university. So also straight away, that getting that personal growth, enhancing their EQ or CQ, building that cultural capital, establishing that cultural capital, very, very important. International networks, enhance employability, gaining that internationally recognised qualification. In some cases, they may be a qualification from Australia and also from Vietnam, where it might be that dual degree arrangement. And then things like minimising culture shock, and also importantly, taking advantage of things that might not be available at their home university. So thinking particularly around things like internships, work integrated learning, diverse multicultural campuses. At Macquarie University alone, we have 11,000 students, 140, representing 140 different nationalities. So, there's obviously some of those benefits as they're transitioning into that Australian university. Then I think we also have options where they can progress into one-year master's programs through packaged visas, what we call master path. So many, many benefits there. Also, of course, considerable benefits to Australian university partners, similar to the Vietnamese institutions, internationalisation, mobility I covered, establishing sustainable conduits into key programs, okay, very important as well, building diversity on campus. And depending on the model, not taking into account that branch campus or basically more looking at the articulation or credit transfer type arrangements, even program licensing, it's mitigated risk in those sorts of models as well. But obviously at the moment, this is being highly encouraged, and I think it's a real growth area. So I think this is going to be a part that continues to develop in the future. One thing I would say though, of course, it's very important to have quality mechanisms, good QA processes in place there, and also vital that it's a true partnership. Universities who are coming in and thinking on focusing purely on recruitment outcomes, it's generally going to last. It's not going to be sustainable. So I think we really need to look at it as a true partnership. So I'll finish there. I think we've got quite a bit to cover, but yeah, I hope that was interesting and we get to discuss that and unpack it a little bit more.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. It was fascinating. Actually, you're right. That transnational education piece is paramount for everybody. I do love how you brought in the issue of culture shock, and I think it's one thing that could be a whole panel discussion itself in the future for Vietnamese students in particular moving to Australia. I see they face culture shock in two ways. it's the new country plus the new learning model. So
Yes.
I think we need to prepare our students moving to Australia a lot better into the future. And an excellent point around QA. Yeah, we're having good quality assurance in education is essential. And I think all Australian providers have excellent QA systems.
Yeah, I agree, Phil. And I think it's obviously in the students, particularly for the student, and it's the number one thing for us is that the students, we monitor their academic progression. If it's an articulation or transfer program, it's in everybody's best interest. Student is first, and that they're progressing, and that support is there.
Thanks, Matt. Interesting. Now we got to move across the river. So we're off to the University of New South Wales. It's a very Sydney-focused panel today with Melbourne in the background. But Ling from the University of New South Wales, I'd love you to share your story on what UNSW can do.
To say that I've met with you and that you're so I'm Ling. Hello, everyone. It's my honor to be invited to the symposium today, and further to what Matt just shared with us about the benefits of Australian higher education. I could say that Australia has a highly respected world-class education system, and so in order to prepare students for a successful career path, Australian education providers have also focused on work-integrated learning, which Matt also mentioned previously. And it could be part of a degree curriculum. It also has received greater interest of students and parents in Vietnam these days. So I'm going to focus talking about work-integrated learning, which I believe Australian universities like Macquarie University, University of Queensland or RMIT also have. But I'm going to use an example of the University of New South Wales to highlight the benefits of Australian higher education. And so a range of undergraduate and postgraduate work-integrated learning courses and programs are offered by faculties and schools at UNSW, which enables students to obtain a holistic education, securing the real-world practical skills needed for a rapidly evolving workplace. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully you could see some points that I'm going to talk about. Yeah, so it actually has three main activities. First one is professional placement that includes internships and clinicals. The student can take placement in Sydney or other countries, but due to the COVID-19, these are to be conducted remotely in our work from home capacity or offshore in certain locations like Vietnam. Second one, we have the career ready mentoring programs that connect our established alumni and industry professionals. And the third one is during projects. These activities can be done on or off campus, face-to-face or online, but also due to the uncertainties of COVID-19, almost of these have been conducted virtually. So now I'm going to mention about the global business practicum that we have done in Vietnam. So this is offered by UNSW Business School, and it has been always a face-to-face internship, which provides students the unique opportunity to gain international understanding, exposure, and workplace skills through studying and working in specified locations overseas, like in Asia, like Indonesia, Hong Kong, Thailand, India, for undergraduate students. And recently expanded to postgraduate students conducted in Ho Chi Minh City, started in 2019. And this program provides host companies with access to students from multiple disciplines and backgrounds who can bring different insights to business problems. And the program also enhances host companies' brand awareness among students in the program, as well as the wider UNSW cohort. So in January 2020, we had the first group of 9 Australian and international students, including Vietnamese students, traveling to Ho Chi Minh City. Students were placed into small groups of 3 to 5 students at host companies for a period of 10 working days to work on a genuine issue of importance to the host company. After all, students combine their strengths, insights, and fresh perspectives to provide a written report of 1,000 words to the host companies and conduct a presentation of 30 to 60 minutes to summarize their findings. Additionally, students attended master classes by local industry leaders, government officials, and academic experts to learn about the local culture through field trips to important cultural landmarks. In early this year, in January, due to the COVID-19, another group of 16 students who came from a variety of backgrounds, including accounting, finance, banking, information system, actuarial studies, marketing, and economics, couldn't travel to Vietnam. So this is why we had to run the virtual placement with our industry partners and mentors for the global business practicums, including TMA Solution, Total Vietnam, LifePath Consulting Group, and Cricket One. Part of the program, students completed 2 half days of orientation with our speakers. So you could see on the screen here, we have the photo of that day that we had speakers from Australia, AusCham lecturers, and students from VNU International Students, International University, who is our articulation partner in Vietnam. So we continue to run this project in Vietnam next year, and because we believe that by doing more integrated learning, students develop the critical skills required for success in the workplace, learn about culture, workplace culture, and develop professional networks, broader perspective and understanding of a specific industry. They also have an opportunity to work in a genuine business setting or work on industry-based projects. And also they have an awareness of industry challenges as well as opportunities. So therefore, students could enhance their employability and career success. So that's all from me. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you, Ling. And work integrated learning is so important for university students. Not everyone who joins a university wants to become a professor and study for a PhD. Most do to get a great job. So I think it's really important that universities, I think Australian universities are fantastic at linking industry with our tertiary studies. Again, at RMIT, one of our mottos is getting ready for life and work, and we're all about getting you that job at the end of at the end of your 3 or 4 year university degree. So yeah, it's fantastic. I think it's a great segue now into for our next speaker, Tony Watson from Box Hill, talking about vocational education. For me personally, I joined, my first foray into education was actually vocational. I spent a few years back in 1977, was my first time I joined a TAFE college as a student. So vocational education has a really is strong to my heart. But Tony, I'd love to welcome you this morning. Box Hill has a wonderful 20-year association with an AusCham organisation called COTO. So Tony, over to you and your experience in the vocational education sector.
Thank you, Phil. Welcome everyone. It's a delight to be here. Great honour to be part of this. Conscious of the time, so I'm going to try and stay within the 5 minutes. Yeah, my name's Tony Watson. My background is really around formalised workplace training through apprenticeships and traineeships, and lots of other things which we can leave for another day. Box Hill Institute does have a significant reputation, and we've been around since 1924, and we operate across 10 countries, and we offer a range of programs from vocational qualifications through to degree programs. And many of those vocational qualifications articulate and offer pathways into degrees. Box Hill is one of 12 TAFE 12 TAFE organisations in Victoria. I think of 4 of those are dual sector. And our commitment is to help build capacity in Vietnam in two areas. One is to really develop vocational education pathways and to address some of the emerging skill shortages that in Vietnam, like in Australia and other countries, Vietnam is experiencing. Phil, you mentioned COTO. Know One, Teach One is what it stands, the acronym for. And we offer Certificate 3 in hospitality, Certificate 3 in commercial cookery. And it's a long-established philanthropic partnership. COTO is a not-for-profit social enterprise, which is based in Saigon and Hanoi, and has been supported by ourselves since 2004. We're very proud to say that we've had over 1,000 graduates, and some of which have undertaken diplomas and bachelors in hospitality management here in Melbourne. Many of the teachers are expatriate, and we've also supported the development of the teachers, the Vietnamese teachers, and to help our students to gain employment, or as I say, a pathway to further study. The other area which is relatively new, which some people may not be aware of, is Box Hill has entered into an agreement with the Australia Vietnam Teacher Training Centre of Excellence, AVCO. And that's a partnership with Hanoi College for Electromechanics. And that is to train teachers in international skills training, but also the Cert 4 in TAE. And we see this as a really important step to, as I say, to build capacity in Vietnam. And as we can see a move towards skill gaps and the need for supporting competency-based training. And this is particularly important for Box Hill in moving its strategy to more TNE and the challenges of that in a COVID world around the compliance and around the quality of the student experience. And in that partnership, we're actually doing three things. We offer 3 courses. One's a TVET trainer course, and this is providing training expertise and knowledge for vocationally qualified teachers. The other one is an assessor course. And then we have a third qualification, short course for trainer and assessor. And that's more towards supervision. And AVCO is expected to help Vietnam meet its increasing demand for high quality trainers and assessors, which are the foundation of a modern industry relevant training system. For Box Hill, and it's been mentioned before, for us, we recognize the challenge of COVID, and we are moving a new strategic direction to more TNE, and also to look at partnerships in order to deliver that, but also the development of high quality online learning. And the areas that we're focusing on are really cybersecurity. I've mentioned education, training, Cert 4 and IST, digital technologies, tourism, hospitality, VCE, and also automotive and engineering. And so we're looking carefully at how we can partner more with organizations in Vietnam, but also to offer pathways into university as well. Just to sum up, and I'll leave it at this, the pandemic for Box Hill has meant that we've had to switch really, really quickly to online and remote delivery. We've had to look really quickly about how we align our strategic direction in the future with a need for us to accept the uncertainties that we'll see for some time, and a recognition that education sector will play an even more important part in realizing the digital transformation agenda of the government of Vietnam, and alongside that, how can we help to address the emerging skill shortages? And I think part of this is the development of vet teachers to ensure that when we are delivering vocational qualifications under the VET quality framework, that the infrastructures there in place, through the infrastructure being the qualified teachers and trainers, and also the infrastructure around industry engagement and relevant training, so that students are coming out with relevant and qualifications that clearly demonstrate their ability to do a job in the changing world we face. And so on that note, I'm going to finish.
Right. Thanks, Tony. It was a sensational discussion. And I think it's actually broadens our understanding of the vocational education sector. I'm sure many people still think it's all about just getting trades, how to be a carpenter or a plumber. But you're mentioning then about cybersecurity, automotive and engineering. There's so many sectors that the vocational sector looks into. And I think we all need to actually have a better understanding of what vocational education means. And as you said, as a pathway into further study. Fantastic.
Thank you. Yep, thanks, Phil.
Now, next, my good friend from Hanoi, Mr. Pham Kukha from the Hanoi Adelaide School. I had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Ha about 18 months ago as she was launching her Adelaide Hanoi School here in Hanoi, and how people in Vietnam now can get an Australian secondary education without leaving home. So I'd love to welcome Ms. Ha to this morning's discussion.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you for having me today, and hello everyone, it's nice to meet you today. So my name is Ha. I'm representing Hanoi Adelaide School today to talk about our own experience in implementing Australian curriculum in a local Vietnamese school context. So Hanoi Adelaide School has approval from our Ministry of Education and Training on integrated programs between Australian curriculum, in this case, the SACE, Australian Certificate of Education, and MOET curriculum, under what Ms. Jen earlier mentioned, the mother document, Degree 86. So implementing integrated programs means we can skip overlapping subjects and overlapping parts in the same subjects between the two curricula to reduce study load for students. It also means that students will have opportunity to study both programs really well and graduate with both the Vietnamese high school qualification and the SACE. Also means that open opportunities, open options for them to enter both international universities and Vietnamese universities in the country, and vocational training, of course, as well. So we can see more benefits than that too. We can see after several years of implementation, we can see that students really enjoy doing the SACE. They feel that the programs are very practical, very beneficial for them, and it's very helped them to actually develop their own interests. They can study for their own interests, for their future career path, rather than just grade for the grades. And you know that Vietnamese education system is very much grade based. Also, they can see that they can apply knowledge and skills immediately into the real lives and for their own interests as well. It's also a totally different way of learning. So the curriculum is capability based, and Vietnam has switched into capability based curriculum as well for about 2 years now, but we still have a long way to go. But the capabilities embedded in all the subjects of the SACE and task assessments really help students to improve their capabilities, help them actually to become better learners, and of course better learners at universities of vocational training of their choice. So that's are the two main benefits of lots of benefits actually of implementing integrated programs for Vietnamese students. And after 5 years of implementing the SACE as a standalone program and as an integrated part in the whole curriculum, we can see that it's very suitable for Vietnamese students, very beneficial especially in terms of implementing it with in the dual program mode, because it supplements really well with the Vietnamese curriculum, and it especially help students to develop capabilities and skills, and somewhat they don't have that yet in their Vietnamese programs. So, but implementing Australian curriculum comes with some challenges as well, especially for lower grades, because we are a school from grade 1 to grade 12. So we don't necessarily need to have students follow Australian curriculum from year 1 to year 10 when they start to do the SAYs. Because when they reach to secondary qualification, I mean, high school in Vietnam education systems, what they need is actually a very good level of English, the required IELTS from 5.5. But as a school, it would be better to have a consistent system where students can actually follow a certain set of curriculum from year 1 to year 12 and develop their capabilities gradually. So that's why we have been doing for lower grades as well, and focusing mostly on English and math, so students have a set of skills and knowledge when they reach to secondary qualification. But that means lots of work in translating standards into text, into teaching, because the guidelines for lower grades are quite broad, and adjustment needs to be made because not all of them are suitable for non-native students. So I think there's some area for improvement in order to promote Australian education as a whole there as well. At the same time, as a school with the names Hanoi Adelaide School and following Australian curriculum, we face some challenges as well in terms of, explaining to parents why we choose Australia instead of maybe US and UK. So Australia, I think, is in the same spot with other English-speaking countries like US, UK, or Canada, but somehow those school system and curricula are more established in the mindset of the parents, just from the parents' perspectives. So when they come to us, they would ask two main questions. First, why Australia and not why Australian curriculum and not US or UK? And whether students would be able to go to other country for higher education rather than just Australia. So that's not rare questions. So I think for parents, they don't question IB or US or UK or even Canada, and they have some mixed images about some certain education system, school system, such as maybe US, UK, Canadian, even German, French, because we used to be French colonia, even Japanese, Korean, Chinese, because geographically they're closer. So, but for Australian education or school system is still a little bit blur for Vietnamese parents. Apart from the country itself, very safe, very convenient, close for parents and students, and higher education is very established as well. So I think for us to stand out, we need to also think what is the unique point for Australian school system. For example, like when we think about Finnish education system, we think of it as the most maybe creative education system in the whole world. So it's hard for us to tell the parents. We tell about the practical aspect of the curriculum, we tell about the quality of it, especially the suitability for Vietnamese students. I think Australian curriculum is especially culturally suitable for Vietnamese students. But I think the unique points need to be defined. And I think that's where I would want to stop my talk here. I'm afraid that I don't over. Thank you.
That was, again, a fascinating discussion on Australian education into Vietnam. And I do like how you are looking at that capability-based programs. And I think capability-based learning will help our students when they do transition into Australian vocational or to Australian tertiary education. It's kind of fundamental that it's just not learning via rote, actually learning by your capability and understanding the difference. I'd love to pose you a question later if we have time.
Yes.
Around Australian education.
Yes.
Folks, we've got 10 more minutes on our session, and I've been given about 27 questions to ask the panel members. So I don't think we'll get through the entire 27 questions, but we'll give it a good try anyway. So I'm just going to ask the panel members, when I do pose a question, to only answer by 1 or 2 minutes. First question to you, Matt, from Macquarie. So what do you want to see differently in the future in higher education? What do you think is next? What's more? What's the new direction tertiary education could take or could focus on?
Very big question. Oh, am I there?
Yep, you're on. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I thought I had a bit of a freeze. Hopefully I'm back. Very big question and a timely question. I think a lot of universities are certainly asking themselves that question with COVID. What's next? It's difficult times for international officers in particular. So when we're looking at sort of particularly that international engagement and how we're working there. But look, I think there's a few interesting areas that pop up immediately. And I think one of the first is, as we actually Director General Hung talked about a little bit earlier, and that is a lot of that capacity building short-term training programs. We are certainly looking at that, and I think we've obviously will keep the traditional degree programs, and that will sort of stay, I think, in the near future anyway, as is. But we're seeing a real shift, particularly say from scholarship providers and opportunities for professional development and capacity building. So professional development in particular, government, but also the corporate world, but then capacity building in sharing knowledge and working with partners, institutions, government, in basically upskilling key people. And this can be across a wide range of areas too. It might be in strategy or a management or a business focus, through to development of environmental policy, or of course in things like medical science or whatever it may be. But we're seeing a real growth area in here, so we're definitely moving towards that space rather than just that full degree. Online, I think we also heard Tony was mentioning particularly about online. I think for Macquarie, and I think many Australian universities, we've been traditionally face-to-face, but obviously with COVID, we're seeing opportunities and different things changing there. We had systems in place, so it was an easier pivot for us, I would say. We had very good digital systems, and we're a founding member of Online Open Universities Australia, I should say. So we had a lot of systems there, but we're seeing, I think, more of a shift into that space, and we're investing in that space. We now have 2 or 3 full, basically sort of television studio quality studios on campus that we deliver certain programs from. And for anybody who's listened to Alan Tudge, some of his Australia's Minister for Education, you'll hear online as a key theme through some of his recent speeches as well as we come out of COVID. And then just to keep time short, I think the other one we've covered well and truly is T&E. So I think it's a bit of a shift.
Great, thanks, mate. As I said, that was a short question, but a 1-hour answer if we want to go into it really deeply. So thank you for being succinct. Next, Ling, I'd love to ask you, and many people are wondering about what the world will happen post-COVID. But if you had a crystal ball when the borders opened, what do you think the Australian education sector could do in the next 6 months, 12 months, 5 years? But you've got 60 seconds to answer it.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. So I actually cannot answer this question on the behalf of the education sector, but I can say that with UNSW in next 6 or 12 months, we continue to engage with the state and the federal government, and obviously follow the guidelines about the safe return our international students back to New South Wales State or to safe return to UNSW campus. Meanwhile, some courses will be maintained with online learning options for students overseas, as long as that's required. And I think after that, maybe after we recovered from the COVID-19 bad influences, we also continue to run some fully online courses for postgraduate students, because we could see the interest of them doing the courses from the home country to save some costs. And also it's quite trendy these days to do online learning. Meanwhile, we will explore some T&E opportunities with Vietnam. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. Great answer. Great answer. Tony, now over to you. So as you said, Box Hill had an association with Vietnam for close to 20 years. So what do you think are some of the similarities between Australian and Vietnamese learners? And do you think Vietnamese students are well suited to competency-based learning?
Look, I think the similarities really depend on the individual's interest and their career paths, and also there's not much difference between Vietnamese students and Australian students when it comes to their families' aspirations, their parents' affordability for education, the school they attended, their career goals, and also, you know, social economic backgrounds they come from. So some students will have aspirations to go on to university. Other students will have aspirations to gain employment. And I think the challenge, the pressure for Vietnam will be addressing emerging skill gaps. And so there's not an oversupply of qualifications which are mismatching with job opportunities. I also note that Vietnam launched a new school curriculum framework in December 2018, and it's competency-based, but based on cognitive and behavioural skills for young students. So this is probably still a lot of work still to be done. So I don't really see much difference between Australia and Vietnam in the dilemma that parents and students have in regards to their selection of career pathways. With competency-based learning, that does require a significant amount of industry engagement so that the students can demonstrate that they're able to do a job of work. And so there would be quite a lot of work for that to happen. But look, I see the strong synergies between both Australia and Vietnam.
Great, thanks, Tony. Excellent answer, mate. Now, Ms. Ha, a question for you. We're down to the last few minutes, so we can't have a big question. But can you tell us what's the strength of an Australian education from the primary and secondary areas? As you know, the British are famous for Cambridge, others are famous for their own sector, and Australia's famous for something. So what's the Australian differentiator for secondary and primary education?
I think I'm still asking myself that question, even though after implementing the SACE for quite some time, and absolutely love the program, the curriculum. But I think the strengths here would be the schools would be feeders for higher education. So higher education, Australian universities, I think in the past few years have done fantastic jobs in promoting their universities. So I think before COVID, Australian university had become #1 destination for Vietnamese parents for their overseas study for their children. So I think that's one of the biggest advantages at the moment. In terms of quality of the curriculum and school system, I believe that parents can see that. But I think still Australia education system, school system is still quite new for Vietnamese parents. So that's something we need to look at. And that's why I still ask the question, what should we do to actually stand out? What should we talk about? What are the most unique points of Australian, school systems? And yeah, so I think the quality is there. It's very innovative. If you look at capability set of Australian curriculum compared with 21st century skills, they are very central, very suitable to develop other 21st century skills for students as well. So I think we have everything there, but I think maybe we need to move stronger. I think we need to present more.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ha.
Yes.
And maybe the panel now can actually help us answer what is the differentiator between Australian education, because I'm going to challenge you all now to think of one word, just one word, that would describe Australian education. That way it will help Ms. Ha with our differentiator in the Australian marketplace here in Vietnam. So Matt, what's the one word for Australian education?
That's actually quite hard. I think excellence.
Excellent, I love it. Ling, one word from Australian education. You're on mute. You're on mute, Ling.
It's really challenging because Matt already took my word.
Excellent squared.
I think it needs to be very descriptive, not just general. Excellent is very general, Matt. Sorry.
I kind of put in one word. I could say just high standard.
Okay, great. Tony?
I was a bit worried Matt might steal my word, but he didn't. So trusted.
Trusted. I think that's a great word. So there you are. We've got excellent, trusted. And I think Australian education is outstanding. I'm sorry, everyone in the room, there were so many questions coming through the chat, so many questions that were emailed me before. We didn't have an opportunity to discuss it. This panel had a 40-minute discussion that went to 50 minutes, but it was a fascinating, fascinating discussion. Thank you so much, Matt, Ling and Tony, for your time today. Thank you for the audience for your fantastic questions. I hope we've answered a little bit about how Australia wants to position ourselves into the future into Vietnam. Thank you so much, guys, and back to you, Aaron.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you, Tony, Matt, Lynn, and Ha. That was a fantastic session. The topic, positioning of Australian education in Vietnam. Folks, we have a short 5-minute break now, and we're about to play a clip during the break. But before we go into a break, I would just like to ask everybody to please turn your cameras on for one group photo before the break. There's over 125 people here, so this might take just a little while to arrange. But please, if everybody, we can ask you to turn your camera on in the next 30 seconds for a group photograph.
All right, smile, everybody. Just keep smiling. It takes a while. We've got about 6 pages. Almost there.
Hi everyone. My name from the Vietnam College, Ho Chi Minh City.
Thanks, everyone.
Hello, good to meet you, Tran. Thank you. That was Andrew Tran helping with our IT. Folks, we have a short break now, just for 5 minutes, so you can go off and get a drink or go to the bathroom if you need to. We're just going to play a short clip during the break, and then after that, we're going to welcome Professor Rick Bennett.
Right, and as a musician, you know, you mentioned in passing that you were teaching the bassoon at the conservatorium.
Yeah, I was
as well.
Yeah, I had students at the conservatorium high school and at many private schools in Sydney. Like my student goes from primary school up until end of year 12, when you have an option to do music for your high school certificate. And I had students who continue to study bassoon professionally at the tertiary level.
Wow, you changed their lives.
I know, I know. I mean,
it is a huge privilege.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of that. Like within 6 or 7 years of teaching, I actually passed my love of music.
Right, and as a musician, you know, you mentioned in passing that you were teaching the bassoon at the conservatorium.
Yeah, I was
as well.
Yeah, I had students at the conservatorium high school and at many private schools in Sydney. Like my student goes from primary school up until end of year 12, when you have an option to do music for your high school certificate. And I had students who continue to study bassoon professionally at the tertiary level.
Wow, you changed their lives.
I know, I know. I mean,
it is a huge privilege.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of that. Like within 6 or 7 years of teaching, I actually passed my love of music to to many students, and that's something I'm so proud of.
Yeah, that's an incredible feeling. And were you playing shows at
yes,
in Sydney as well?
Yes, and when I first came to Sydney with my mom, we actually joking about one day I could play at the Sydney Opera House. Yeah, I even got my mom saying that in front of the Opera House when we went there for sightseeing. And I'm just so glad that after I finished my Bachelor of Music, I got the chance to play with both professional orchestra at the Sydney Opera House, the Opera Australia Orchestra and the Sydney Symphony. And I played with them until 2 weeks before I moved back to Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
And that was a very long journey. I learned a lot as a musician. And I learned a lot to be able to do something with the music education in general.
Must have been an incredible, like, full circle moment when you come back to the Opera House and you actually play there.
I know. It's just
can't.
like dream come true, and the dream lasts for like years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But why didn't you stay in Sydney? Why did you come back to Vietnam?
Yes, I mean,
I know it's not the virus because you came back like way before.
Yes, I came back before that, few months before the virus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was always thinking about moving back to Vietnam one day, to be honest. Yeah, but I just didn't know when. But then in 2019, I was offered a full-time job in the quite a new symphony orchestra in Vietnam, very international, the Sun Symphony Orchestra. And at that time, I study, I work, I play, I taught. And I thought at that time, well, now I have some experiences. Maybe I should bring those experiences back home to do something meaningful, to help the young student like me when I was young. I always needed someone to guide me, and I was really lucky with that. So I thought it's my responsibility to pass that on to the next generation of music students in Vietnam. So that's the main reason why I moved back. The full-time job, and to move back to do something I love, to inspire people as much as I can.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back from the break. That was a short clip from a series that will be screening on VTV7 in the coming weeks about Australian education in Vietnam. Before I introduce Professor Rick Bennett, I'd just like to note that there's been some requests for the slides to be uploaded, and we'll be uploading some of these presentations to YouTube next week. We can't guarantee they'll all be uploaded, but look out for it via the AusCham YouTube channel next week. For now, I would like to introduce Professor Rick Bennett to talk about barriers to online education in higher education in Vietnam. About Professor Rick Bennett, raised and educated in London, Professor Rick Bennett completed his undergraduate studies in fine art before moving into the UK film and television industry. After emigrating to Australia in 1990, Rick joined the Uni of New South Wales, where he worked for 25 years, completing a Masters of Higher Education in 1998 and later graduating from Sydney University with a PhD in online education. In 2015, Rick arrived in Vietnam to lead RMIT's School of Communication and Design, later progressing to the position of Vice President Academic and currently employed as the Executive Dean Academic and Students for RMIT University in Vietnam. Welcome, Professor Rick Bennett.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I'm just checking a few things because I've got a couple of screens going on here and a phone, and I'm just sort of checking everything's all right, and I didn't leave myself on mute and my camera's going, so I think all's good. Look, thank you so much to AusCham for their invitation to give this talk. it's a very short talk. I've packed a lot in. And what I'd like everyone to know is that I quite like this, that I was given a title. In my old days as a designer, we used to be given a brief to work for, and AusCham gave me a title to work with, which was Barriers to Online Education for Higher Education in Vietnam. And it's sort of, I like to work with that, and I've interpreted it a particular way. And what I did with it was try and be a bit positive. And most of us here in Vietnam are in a very sort of slightly down sad stage at the moment, all being locked up and locked in. And so I didn't want to dwell too much on barriers being a negative, but sort of talk about this talk, Barriers to Online Education, being a positive thing. And so what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, I'm going to just say next when I want the next slide. And so it's a very short talk, and I'm not here to probably enlighten you or give you any answers or anything, but hopefully I am here to provoke you a bit and make you think about, oh, maybe that's an idea. So strap yourselves in. We've got a lot of pictures to go through. I don't usually do presentations with words on, there are mostly pictures. So hopefully enjoy the talk, because I'm the last one of the session, so I've probably got to keep you focused and awake, dare I say. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, yes, so I've got a bit of looking over here and make sure. Okay, so look, this is a very quick slide. We know we're in a COVID sort of state, and what I wanted to do was just sort of look at some positives for online education resulting from the pandemic, rather than focus on any negatives. And also this talk is about barriers in Vietnam, and quite interestingly, I'll go through and explain that I don't think there are many barriers in Vietnam that aren't barriers everywhere else as well. There's one or two, but predominantly the barriers that face online education in Vietnam, I believe, follow most of the world and in many countries as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so look, I'm going to go through a couple of slides here to look at the positive of what the world we live in, perhaps currently and post-COVID. Hopefully you can see the slide here. The picture on the left, looking down the river at the Bitexco building in Ho Chi Minh City, is the view I have every morning and every evening. It's from my living room window. And that river, it's not quite clear here because it's a small picture, but that river is usually often full of plastic and polystyrene boxes floating along in it. And for the last few weeks, it's been beautiful and it's been quite pristine. The image on the right isn't the Seychelles or somewhere in Bermuda. It's actually the beach at Vũng Tàu last week, which is usually, for those of you who have been, is quite dirty and very, very populated, particularly in holiday seasons where you probably wouldn't see any of that beach at all. And the image in the middle is last week's, or very early this week's, air visual of the whole of Vietnam. And you can see for the first time in many, many months, it's been very clean. So air, noise and traffic pollution has certainly increased. So the environment is looking good. Next slide, please. Okay. Social relations. Now, I've done a lot of this based on what I talk to people about, what I talk to staff, students about, and we've done a lot of investigating at RMIT of how our staff are feeling and how our students are feeling. One of the positive things coming back as well is social relations, particularly within Vietnamese families. There's a lot more togetherness within the families. People are spending more time. They're not having to spend so much time at work. And there is one fact now, I say this rather sort of funnily and perhaps skeptically, a lot of the response we said was it's good to see the men in the house around so much. Can I get the next slide, please? Because I don't know if this has anything to do with it. The next slide is one that I've got from, is from the Bureau of Statistics, which show that in 2020, you can see a massive decline in beer sales, a massive decline in wine sales, and a massive decline in spirit sales, and a rise in soft drink sales. So it might be quite funny about that, but there is something to be said for that in terms of this kind of effect on drinking cultures in not just Vietnam, but in many countries, and how that has an effect on perhaps family relations. Next slide, please. Okay, we all know that obviously the traffic is a lot quieter. Probably when I talked to staff, and we did a lot of staff surveys, as I said, when people started to work from home last year and through into this year, was that the number one favoured response was that there was no more, the commuting was either easier, or if they were working from home, there wasn't any commuting. And there was so much more time available to them. It's also had a massive effect on traffic accidents and injuries and death tolls, which are around the 20% down from previous year. Next slide, please. You can see I'm racing through these. So, okay, this is one that I wonder how many of you have benefited from. Again, feedback coming back from staff and students and in general is that we're eating far healthier. We're taking time to cook for ourselves because we can't go out and eat in restaurants. And we're doing a lot more personal fitness, certainly in the house. And I'm not ashamed to say that during the last session, when Phil was interviewing the four speakers in the previous session, which were fascinating, I did 2,000 steps walking around my front room, still able to listen in and engage in everything that was said. So I think more time for our personal well-being can only be a good thing. Next slide, please. Okay, flexible working. Okay, this is I've put a couple of funny slides up here, but I would like to think, I wonder how many of our 123 guests today online are sitting there with a shirt and tie on and not so many trousers, just a pair of shorts or something, or socks and slippers as this guy is here. I certainly do some of my meetings like that, and I'm sure if we're honest, other people do as well. Likewise, to the lady on the right who is doing her ironing probably whilst in a Zoom session or a meeting. And I do attend many meetings, high-level meetings at RMIT, particularly in Melbourne, where I have to attend and I don't have to contribute all the time. So I'm often doing other things at the same time as having my laptop open and listening to the meeting. So flexible working is a very good thing, and I think that's come out through many industries. Next slide, please. And so finally, what I think has been a positive out of the pandemic is that we are now able to think things differently and think of different ways of working and be very much far more imaginative and get rid of that thing of, but we've always done it this way, because it's time to stop that. And instead of looking, outside the box, we need to be seeing through the box or getting rid of the box and seeing completely new options to us for how to do things. So with that in mind, can I go to the next slide, please? Which really brings us down to online education. It's not that online education is a new thing or a great new idea. I certainly was teaching online in 1998 as one of the first people to do that. So that's nearly 20 years ago. And we should remember that in all of this, that online education is still a late teenager or in its early 20s, as opposed to face-to-face teaching, which has been around for thousands and thousands of years. But there are barriers for online education, and which is what I want to explore in the next few slides, and hopefully to see whether these are common across many, many cultures and many institutions. We've heard from so many today. Let's examine this. Does it apply to you, and does this apply to your stakeholders, in which our case is our students and our parents and perhaps our industry? So next slide, please. One of the things I do think has been really positive is that online education has been around for 20 years or so. I've been doing it for 20 years. And in fact, about 5 years ago, I kind of gave up leading a whole online department when I was at the University of New South Wales. I had a whole department about online learning and teaching, but I kind of gave up and banged my head against the wall for 15 years because nobody seriously wanted to do it. It was the way of the future, but education had this funny sort of very old-fashioned principle that it will affect everyone else, but it won't affect us. We'll still teach in the same way, we're using the same traditional methods and the same teachers, and we'll be the last to be affected. And that's simply not the case. And so what I think COVID has done in a positive way, if we're looking at any positive, is it's brought online education to the front of the queue, and now it's on everybody's lips and on everybody's thoughts. And some people, we know that some of the speakers in the previous session were already ready for it, and others have got to spin up really, really quickly, which is very difficult for them to do. Next slide, please. So we need to get rid of this perception, and it's very prevalent here in Vietnam, but it's not alone in Vietnam, it's prevalent in many places, that online education or online learning is a plan B. It's a plan we put in place when plan A doesn't work. And that's certainly been the case in many, many institutions up until probably last year. All right, notable exceptions like the Open University and things like that, where that's been totally, the plan B has been the plan A. But we need to stop thinking of plan A is on campus face to face, and if that doesn't work, then we'll go online. Next slide, please. What is interesting though, and I took this from a paper, and you probably can't see that, but let me read this out for you. It's saying, according to parents in April 2020, it's talking about the fact that majority of parents think that online study, their students or their children have neglected their studies too much, or else not studied at all. And a lot of the reasons for that have been technical problems. So let's investigate that as being a real perception. It does exist that online learning is a plan B or a subsidiary to the plan A face-to-face. If you go to the next slide, let's talk about the technical aspects. The number of internet users in Vietnam is high, 69 million. It's a big, you can kind of count these as percentages. Internet penetration in Vietnam, high, and mobile internet penetration, high. Likewise, online shopping, high, online gaming, very, very high. And so I often hear that Vietnamese students don't like studying online, but I've never accepted that. And I wanted to investigate the reasons for that. What are the barriers that they're facing? And so if we look at internet reach, it's very high. If you look at price, it's one of the lowest costs in the region. You know, it's out of the Philippines and Malaysia and Thailand and Singapore. It is by far the cheapest in the region and the fastest. So they have good penetration, fast internet, and it's very affordable. Next slide, please. However, one of the things that probably is not unique to Vietnam, but probably different from, say, the UK, Australia, or US, is that I have to talk about this outside of my environment, which is RMIT, but into schools and colleges, where if students are now working from home, have they got the technology to use at hand? Because that is expensive to spin up for them or for parents to buy. And often in the past, what's always happened is that the technology is so varied and so complicated that puts them off. So that quote referring to technology being a problem, I'd like to see how much is it about access to technology, or is it about the technology itself? And as you can see on the right, technology by now should be very, very simple and certainly mobile. The next point I'd like to, institutional change. Now, this is a very interesting one. Now, institutions like the picture on the left, you know, my institution, let's take that, RMIT in Melbourne, is huge. It's a huge, huge institution. And so without criticizing it or other universities like UNSW, I know Lynn was talking about, which I used to work at, it's a huge universities. They're difficult to change, and it's not easy for them to change things. You can see the picture on the right, like a jet ski can change very, very fast. And us being here in Vietnam as RMIT, I find that the ability to change quick is a really good thing. And if someone said to me about Australian education, that one word, I'd say really flexible compared to many others in the world. I always found Australian curricula and education institutions quite quick to change. However, we have to allow that it's not easy for institutions to change because it is costly, it takes time and it takes effort, and it takes a lot of infrastructure to put in place. Next slide, please. Now, this is the one that I do think is a little bit different. This is the one where I do think there is a bit of a local context compared to, say, Australia or Canada or New Zealand or Europe. The average household in Vietnam is larger than it is in many other places. We're talking about Australia here, so compared to Australia. The Vietnamese average household is 3.9 and the Australian is 2.4. Now, one of the reasons why I've always thought this is a bit of an issue compared to Vietnam is that when our students are studying online, often they come to campus to do their studying online, and it makes you think, why are they doing that? So after a lot of looking into this, it's things like the comfortability of the environment, the safety of the environment, and more than anything, the peace and quiet of the environment, where they can go to a space where it isn't surrounded by their family or people running around, or, you know, so the conditions of where our students live and exist. I mean, that picture is a bit of a, I don't mean that to be insulting or anything, but just the nature of how Vietnamese live in urban environments is very different to how they perhaps live in Canada, US, Australia, Europe. So I do think the personal environment is something that we need to look at. Next slide, please. Okay. The next slide is all about teaching change. Slide on the left, the more traditional one of the teacher sitting at the front, the sage on the stage, compared to something far more modern and realistic now, which is a teacher perhaps sitting in their office or in their classroom or in their home, but far more integrated with the students, and far more less the focus point, but more the content provider. Next slide, please. And updating curricula, I think, is one of the keys to online learning and teaching. Still, even if we're doing things online, like in this conference, for example, we're still showing PowerPoint slides with lots and lots of text and lots and lots of graphs and lots and lots of headings and lots of different fonts and sizes of fonts. Whereas we need to be updating our curricula to what our students are used to, which is accepting very fast and rich media based on screen access, usually in video format or moving format. And that takes a lot of time to do, and it takes a lot of effort. So, you know, in our curriculum design, our universities are full of curriculum designers and names similar to that, and I've always questioned quite what they are. Should we now add hair and makeup and lighting and sound editing to those preparations for classes? Because to make really good video content, that's the kind of production that we need to do. So we, instead of becoming, you know, the changing role of the teacher from the teacher at the front of the stage to a production office in terms of content. And I do think that in the future, in the next few years, content is king. Next slide, please. So that's a bit about an overview of some barriers, and I'm now just going to quickly run through the last few slides to say, okay, in leadership, in online education, how perhaps is RMIT doing it? And I'm not going to do a big plug for it, but what ideas have I taken, and I'm leading at RMIT, to try and change this public perception and to respond to some of the slides I've just shown. Number one, and I think one of the main things is that when you go online learning, whichever institution you're in, where possible, the aim is to take your whole university or your whole college or your whole school online and not just rely on the learning and teaching. The learning and teaching is one aspect of a student's experience, whether they're at a school or a college or a university. The other side is the whole social interaction and the bit that isn't just about, as Phil mentioned, RMIT talks about life and work. Well, the work side of it is obviously the programs and the study, but what's turning these individuals from perhaps, you know, tearaway teenagers into responsible, ethical, environmentally aware, socially aware adults and future leaders. It's all the other things they do. It's the kind of services we provide, the sports and fitness, the careers advice, the language classes, the personal age workshops, the interview training, the art exhibitions, the library competitions. All of that has to go online as well, not just the learning and teaching. And I'm proud to say at RMIT we've really focused on that. That also has a big part to play when anyone brings up the question of, well, we want fee reductions because you're now teaching online. Nothing's cheaper. In fact, things are more expensive when you put in the infrastructure. But if you're providing exactly the same services in a really well done online way, there's absolutely no reason why it would be cheaper. And if it is, you're admitting that it's plan B. Next slide, please. New classroom concepts. You know, we've gone from sitting in exam halls not too long ago, people still do it, don't look at your neighbour, don't copy, don't cheat, don't collaborate, to the screen on the left, which is sort of the fully interactive, what I call classrooms of the future. So I'm really thinking at RMIT about not just thinking, we're building these new rooms where people aren't just little postage stamps on a screen, they're really big parts in a room along with people who are physically there. So the kind of, next slide please, the kind of notion of hybrid learning, these are the ones that we're building in at RMIT, where, you know, half of the class are physically there, half of the class are digitally there. And that has huge potential to do classes between our campuses in Hanoi and Saigon, but also into Australia as well. And to think that the possibilities it raises are huge. The next slide is a bit more conceptual and a bit more me sort of thinking through the box. And I've got this notion that we need to decentralize universities, and you can still say schools and colleges, because we've always had this sort of perception, it's maybe a bit of an arrogant one, that we build this big building and you all come to us. Now, that's been thrown out completely by many industry partners in terms of the way they operate. So why aren't we putting what I call universities on the high street? So a student can choose to go online, come into campus, or go to a local hub where they can have a safe space, a quiet space, an air-conditioned space. And my plan is to tee up, sort of do a collaboration with, you know, a very well-known coffee brand, coffee chain, and put RMIT sections in there where a student can go and get a free cup of coffee, a free biscuit, have great internet, it's safe, there's air conditioning, and they can study online as well in those places. So we take the universities to them. And the last slide I'd say is, it's up to us all to help Vietnam and Vietnam to help us in this sort of collaborative space. And this is a program that we've been running, which many of you might have been involved with, called the Online and Digitally Enhanced Learning for Vietnam. It's where we're working with the Embassy of Australia, the Consul Generals of Australia, MOET, the varying government agencies, many universities, to share and not to impose any ideas, but just to say, look, this is what we've found works. What do you find works? And it's very much along the lines of quality assurance, curriculum, how to bring. So it's the kind of issues that I've just raised there about teaching, infrastructure, access, all those kind of things. And we're sharing our thoughts on this, ready to propose a paper to the government early next year as recommendations and guidelines on what might be best for people to adapt quickly to online learning and teaching. So to end it, just to make sure that online learning and teaching is no longer a plan B or a second grade option. It's equally first, as they both have advantages and they both have disadvantages. So that's it. Thank you very much. That was a lot to get through. And I do hand back to Aaron.
Thank you very much, Rick Bennett. I'm just seeing if there's any questions from the audience for Rick before we wrap up. I haven't got any, but Rick, that was fantastic. I actually did have one that was discussed earlier. Just as a question for RMIT, in the future, in your eyes, will all the students have to come to classes in person, or will there be a time that students could learn permanently from home?
In an ideal world, we'd have an online option, we'd have a face-to-face option, and we'd have these hybrid options. However, one of the things that I am introducing, and I've just got, it's going very much down the pipeline, and very much in answer to one of the points that Jen raised in her keynote at the beginning, was that I am introducing a notion into our programs that by the end of next year, 20% of any program you do at RMIT Vietnam will be online. And that's for many reasons. Partly because the students are asking for it. I mean, post-COVID, they're not saying, oh, great, we can all come back on campus. They're saying, hey, can we still do some stuff online? Because it suits a lot of people. But also, most interestingly, our industry are asking for it. In part of their soft skills and qualifications that they need digitally proficient young people who are so used to working collaboratively between offices or between departments, working on Zoom and Teams and things like that. So it's a big part of what we're doing in our industry. So yes is the answer to that.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Rick Bennett from RMIT. Ladies and gentlemen, that draws us to end of the first day of our symposium. I'm just going to have a quick recap and then introduce tomorrow. Today, we've heard a keynote speech from the MOET and then a response from the Australian government. We've had a panel discussion on the position of Australian education in Vietnam, and we've just heard from Rick Bennett on barriers to online education in higher education. Of course, we realise that conference and symposia are all about best practices. They're all about thought leadership and dialogue. But they're also about in-person events and networking. And with that note, tomorrow I'd just like to highlight the fact that we do have an audience engagement session at the very end of tomorrow's 2-hour session. Further ahead, we are certainly planning to return to in-person symposium in 2021. If you're not in Vietnam right now, we encourage you to keep an eye out for this. Get your passports ready to travel, because it will happen again one day when you can all come in and network and show your wares and so forth. Folks, for tomorrow, we have another 2-hour series of presentations, which includes a keynote from Austrade, Rebecca Ball. It includes another panel discussion on the digital future challenges of the education sector, including panelists from UNIS, Ho Chi Minh City Open University and Nice, Australia, and a panel moderator, the CEO of Ericsson Vietnam. After that, we have more presentations on partnerships between institutions in Australia and Vietnam, and then our audience engagement session. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank, on behalf of AusCham Vietnam, all the presenters and all the institutions they represent today. That includes RMIT, it includes the Ministry of Education and Training, the Australian Government, Box Hill Institute, Macquarie University, Uni of New South Wales, Hanoi Adelaide School, and RMIT in both Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. It's now 11:30, ladies and gentlemen. That is the conclusion of our first day of our symposium. We'll see you again tomorrow, 9:30 to 11:30. Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you.